I'd like to explore with you a bit this idea of the kind of intensity and the kind of, darkness even that generates strong emotional reaction, hoping or maybe not, that this kind of emotional reaction then leads to a kind of reflection of deliberation in the audience. Um, and while I think that the logic makes sense, right? If there is the shock value kind of shakes you and then you can open up some questions. I wonder if, especially with speculative and sci-fi music, sci-fi movies, if this preference for dark things going south, evil. Isn't this also, I don't know, making the imagination a bit impoverished? Doesn't it take something away from us, this constant, um, you know, exposure to how things could go wrong and
Right.
really dire?
I mean, I guess it depends on really how you see it, right? Like, are we trying to exercise those feelings in ourselves? Because we feel them no matter what, right? So then by mediating them, uh, Bigelow had to say this so many times in her career, right? Like, representing something is not endorsing it. Representing
Definitely, yeah.
something is very, very much about uh working through it. And as such, there might be, right, like, I don't know, this is a very psychoanalytical way of dealing with things, but there might be some ways in which these anxieties that we all feel, and of course we feel them because we're in such an industrialized and complex moment in world history, and because we have an awareness of the world that literally is unnatural, right? Like at no point before modernity did people have to carry this much of the world at every single point. Then sometimes I think these negative emotions, oh, movies allow us to process these negative emotions and kind of like integrate them and come back to the world and then still work in the world. I think that it's when they push you into the depressive standpoint that things get more complicated. And I think, I and I have been discussing this a lot lately, how so many plots nowadays are trauma plots. Like that is the way that so much of our popular culture is structured. I don't know that that's like there is a moment beyond which I do think that starts eating at you, right? Like I'm not a religious person, but it starts eating at your soul. Like it feels like, like you're in that mode where it's impossible to move beyond it. I think comedy can help a little bit with that. Even in super tough moments, I think films can also help us kind of like see that those feelings that we're feeling right now, other people have felt at other points in time. I will say comedy has always been my answer to this. There's this particular comedy sci-fi animated series that I'm thinking of. When you grew up, did you ever watch Johnny Quest?
No.
It was this stupid 1970s Hanna-Barbera cartoon. And it was kind of an adventure series with this guy who's a super scientist and his son, Johnny Quest. And Johnny was the child adventurer who would go with his dad on all these adventures. And you have a bodyguard who's, like protecting them at all times. And you have a little brown child named Haji who's adopted by Dr. Quest, and he's the other, the sort of diversity there, but he's very tokenized and it's very weird. And then you have a lot of messy, messy representations of other cultures. It's this very kind of like age of it's basically a Western taking into the sci-fi world with a child as your lead. So there's this TV series that started in 2003. It ended a couple of years ago. They came out with a season every 2 to 4 years. So they wrote it very, very slowly and carefully, and it was written by two people alone. It's called The Venture Brothers. And it imagines basically a Johnny Quest type, all grown up, completely fucked up by the history that has lived
Live.
through. He lives essentially in the ruins of his dad's compound with, like all this 1970s futurism embedded into it. And he has his own two kids who are completely, completely messed up again because all of these Oedipal dynamics around fathers and sons. And they all live in the decaying world of the decaying world before, you know? And it's immensely smart at kind of thinking through how kind of captains of industry get turned into superheroes in the popular imagination, but they're still essentially engaged in this. Basically, rich and powerful people are engaged in these patterns of villainy and superheroism that actually have no reality or relevance to the rest of the world. So there's a guild of calamitous intent, that's all the bad guys. And then there's the Office of Secret Intelligence that has all the protagonists. And they have all of these very managed ways of doing battle against each other, right? But it's all just kind of a show that they all seem to 100% believe in, but it's just destructive to everything, primarily themselves and
Mhm.
their world and their children and their ability to grow as people. And it's such a brilliant show about taking all of these typologies that show up in our pulp fiction, right? Like you have a necromancer, you have a Jefferson Twilight, a Blackula hunter, right? Like a black vampire hunter who at one point gets angry and explains, I don't know what the PC term for that is, right? Like I only hunt and kill black vampires. You have all of these typologies like cyborgs of various sorts. You have all of these superheroes and supervillains that are essentially puns turned into a character. And they keep engaging with this material and visual history of modernism in the 20th century. So you have the Venture Compound is developed based on World's Fair buildings from 1964. They
What
have
fair building?
World's Fair, the World's Fair in Queens. It was called the World of Tomorrow, the 1964 World's Fair. So they had this huge fairground with all of these exhibits about the future at that point. Motorola was one of the main sponsors, and they built these buildings that were supposed to be super fancy for the future and futuristic looking. And now, of course, that is kind of like an abandoned space in
Decrepit
Queens.
and sad, yeah.
Exactly. But essentially, they take those designs and integrate them into the venture compound. They take, like, there's a space station called Meteor Major that looks like, uh, and there's a bunch of other things in space that look exactly like communist era Yugoslav brutalist monuments. Like they're drawn very, very directly from those and turned into space stations. So you have this history of essentially modernism in the 20th century integrated with its um, ideological and narrative aspects, and then completely torn apart through comedy. And there's something about that show that to me feels so valuable in thinking about how we think about the future, as opposed to, like imagining a particular future. Um, that that might be a way out of this, right? Like, how do we not get depressed? How do we still manage to be critical? And think through these processes of
Mhm.
im imagining the future, failing at imagining it, maybe trying to figure it out again. And the thing that that show really lands on that I find fascinating is it loves play. Ultimately, it's immensely joyful in how playfully it builds its world, and you get the sense that artistic expression actually can help you work through all of these things without landing you in any specific singular place, without blocking you in an ideological perspective. And that one is really, really worthwhile for me in that way. You know, it makes me think of something like what was super acclaimed recently, Severance. I don't know if you saw this,
Yeah, actually.
the Apple show. And it's the simple premise, right? Like you get to clip your memory between your
Mhm.
workplace and your real life, and as such, of course, you end up
Work-life
with a
balance
version.
is worst.
Yeah, you end up with a version of yourself that's enslaved in the service of the other version of yourself. It's a pretty great show. It's enormously formally balanced and smart about how it uses this Bell Labs building in New Jersey in order to create the sense of the retro future. Um, it was fun to get through the two seasons of it. I would watch more of it anytime. I don't think I ever got from it as much as I got from watching The Venture Brothers. You know,
Mhm.
and the Venture Brothers will never, ever, ever be talked about with that level of
Pathos, and
seriousness
mhm.
because it doesn't take itself as seriously. Because it
Mhm.
actually knows that to a certain degree, this is at least a little bit of joke, you know, and
Mhm.
what worries me right now is people
Interesting point to make, yeah.
with a lot of power taking themselves very, very seriously and not being able to take that step back and see the ridiculousness. Like the Musk Bezos axis, basically. Um, it's really we have to integrate into our sense of power all of these ways of critiquing it while at the same time, right, acknowledging the things that some of these people have done right? Like no one manages supply chains like Amazon, Tesla managed to, or SpaceX managed to do things cheaper than NASA, even though that fucked up NASA funding, and that's why we are in the place that we are right now. Uh, right, like there are some achievements there. I still have an Amazon account, and it's a convenience that would be hard for me to actually drop. At the same time, I know that that guy takes himself a little too seriously, and I'm worried about what that means in terms of how he's shaping the world.
Mhm.
And that's where I'm, yeah, I would integrate comedy pretty much at every point in teaching media because I think that it's what allows us to engage with things seriously, but at the same time build that distance and realize the moments when we just become ridiculous.
Yeah, sorry, you gave me a lot. I'm processing still. Um, yeah, because I never thought, and I kind of like it now that I think of it, that in a way you talk about more, serious or drama-like sci-fi movies as one kind of medicine, so to say, whereas comedy is counterbalancing that kind of bitterness of the first medicine and gives you a laughter.